welcome everybody to our second and last Q&A session with Jude. Jude, say hi so everybody's screen
hello there.
Changes, and then it'll be flipped back to me hopefully. So yeah, we're going to continue with some Q&As. If you've got some questions that you'd like to ask, if you can use the chat function please, and send them to me, and I'll try and bring the questions into the chat or direct them. If you're keen to ask them yourself, put a little smiley or a yes at the start and at the end of your comments. Otherwise, I'll ask them on your behalf. I'm just stalling a bit because I'm aware a number of people have registered and we're not there yet, so they might be kind of latecomers, so I don't want to get to the meat and to veg quite yet. But yes, the series is over really. So we've had 7 lockdown lectures in the series, and we had the first 3, and then the last 4. And again, thank you everybody for joining us for this one. There will be a poll halfway through, and then there will be a separate poll at the end. And the poll at the end really is going to be our kind of evaluation and reflection on the lectures. In participation with Jude, I'm not springing this on him by any means, but genuinely, as always with these kind of stuff, we are genuinely interested in feedback, because I think from our perspective anyway, this is a format that I'd like to do again with Jude and with other people as well. So we are looking at ways of making this bigger and better and more effective in one way to our students. And in one way, you students who are here, slightly preaching to the converted, because we could have had what you could have won. We could have had about 90 of our own students in this chat. And we've got significantly less than that. So in one way, I'm really interested in how could we make this event more appealing to those who haven't tuned in. I am aware that people they've had assignments over the last few weeks. There's been an exam, and there is one more exam for years 1 and 2. So we're at the tail end of assessments and everything of uni life. And we are in this weird time where everything is a bit uncertain. And it doesn't look like we're going to go back to any kind of normal quite soon either. So we want those feedback. And it kind of leads me on to my first question to you, Jude, really. So the chat's really designed for our students, and especially thinking about the third years that we're graduating into an industry which is significantly different to what they were expecting 6 months ago. So I think a lot of your talks really forced the issue really of students and ourselves really to question ourselves, question your own beliefs and the way that you work, and have you internalized a lot of the stuff about design and your career and what you wanted to do with that. Hindsight is always a brilliant thing, and I think from my experience, Bangor Uni, we invite students, or we put events on which are non-compulsory. We get invited with MSpark people on Anglesey. They do a lot of work, and there's seminars and workshop and stuff there, and we always invite our students. And sometimes it can be a bit of a hard graft to get students to attend those events. I remember this year kind of leaning quite heavily on a couple of students to go to an event, gave them a lift there, and then when they came, I picked them up and they were buzzing. It was a brilliant event. So why didn't all the other students go to that event? So it's a bit like your talk about pushing the button. And I know you've talked a lot about the internship you had, but also, and I don't mean this in a nasty way, there was 2 places for an internship, and you were one of 2 applicants who applied for that internship. So possibly if somebody else applied for it, you might not have gone, but you went, and there's loads of experiences and stuff that you benefited from that experience. So to come to my question, my monologue, I don't know, can you therefore just talk a bit about putting yourself in the room, whatever that room is, and making things happen rather than waiting for things to happen, and how the mindset might just be slightly different in both of those perspectives. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting, that thing of, I mean, as you said, it's an interesting thing to consider who this Q&A is for. It doesn't, I think this is like the same statistic in any sort of format you create. You look at any trend on social media or lectures, people are interested at the beginning, and then of course there's some tailing off. So I think in some ways this feels par for the course. I guess in some ways I feel like the Q&A, we were catering to everyone, whereas we're catering now to people who are, should we say, quite committed to sticking it out. And so I would say, sincerely, thank you. But in some ways, it's probably a good signal that you're even just willing to, not because my lectures are so fabulous or I'm so fascinating to watch, but just frankly, given the options that Bangor University has for you at the minute, this is an option. So I think sticking with something is better than freezing rabbit in the headlights style. And I guess that probably says a little bit to the strength of character of the people who are watching this. So sometimes if you really don't know what to do, just continue and do something, is a little bit how I've often felt as a student. Is that, you mentioned the thing about Norway, that was very much to fill in the gap there. The two places were also for the top students. That was how they were going to do a tiebreaker. And I was really like B's and C's and D's in my first year. Things were very messy. I had lots going on in my life. And so I certainly wasn't guaranteed that place. Indeed, had anyone who was just even moderately better than me, they would have by default got that place to go to Norway. And it was one of the biggest experiences of my academic education. So I guess the other one that I've mentioned to some of the students, so forgive me if I'm boring anyone here, but IDEO is obviously a very cool company if you can get some experience. And I essentially saw on Twitter that they had a hackathon. I was in Bristol. I phoned up and said, look, I can see all the places are fully booked, but I bet you got a load of people who are really good at service design and code, and I bet you haven't got too many people at prototyping. Am I right? And they were sort of like, go on then. What are you getting at? And I was like, well, I'm willing to drive across to London tonight, sleep on my mate's floor, and be with you at 8:30 tomorrow. And I'd love to be a part of this. And so they said, well, hold on, we're not really supposed to do this, but let me just go ask the organizer. They came back and said, go on then, you sound really keen. And I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that in COVID, a lot of the opportunities out there are going to be for those who really want it. And that isn't the same thing as saying you have to be exceptional and the top of the class. It's just saying, I think, right here, right now, it's going to be about enthusiasm and drive that will probably get you an internship or a placement. And in case you're thinking, that's all very well for you to say, I've literally just worked with a startup who's just employed a graduate about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And he is hugely enthusiastic, passionate, and motivated. He happens to be talented as well, but I will bet pound to a penny that he got it through drive and enthusiasm and just being willing to put the work in. And so it's a real pleasure working with that young gentleman, and of course the startup that it was. But I guess that's what I'm trying to say is do not spend a lot of time fixating on what your grades are or aren't, because essentially all bets are off in COVID. No, I'm not saying no one cares what your grade is. Of course they will. But right here, right now, I'd say enthusiasm and drive and commitment to the subject, that's going to be more interesting to an employer.
And in one sense, you've still got to prove yourself after you get that job. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you can't prove yourself unless you're in that room. So a lot of the times, and I don't know what it is, and I'm trying to avoid the negatives, but it's just put yourself out there. I say kids, but put yourself in a position where things will happen. And I think I only met you or started emailing you, Jude, from looking at seeing your stuff on your website and kind of going, well, I've got this thing going, this conference. Do you want to come and kind of give us a talk and stuff? And it's amazing how things just snowball when you're in rooms. And when I say rooms, I mean virtual rooms nowadays, LinkedIn, starting conversations with people, and not just, and sometimes I think you've got to be a bit strategic as well, rather than just going straight away and kind of going, give me a job. Just engage with those people first, show that you're interested in what you're doing, what they're doing, and ask some questions about their work. From that conversation, quite often, projects happen or stuff happen which wouldn't have otherwise happened. And is it a bit scary doing that, Jude? How can we encourage the students or anybody not to be afraid and that rabbit in the headlights?
I don't know. I think it's a little bit, I guess the way to frame it to yourself is you've got nothing to lose, other than perhaps time and a little bit of money. And in many ways, the pride or the dignity is quite small, because, you know, it's one thing for, you know, a big world famous designer to get knocked off a pedestal, but you're not a big world famous designer. So the media aren't baying for your blood or trying to make a fool of you. So if you create something which you think is kind of cool, you post it on LinkedIn, you copy in a bunch of people who you can see work at that company and say, what do you think? Would love some feedback. They might just not reply because they're busy, and that's fine. But they'll probably have a look at it, and they might even direct message you. And you just don't know. And the worst case scenario is that someone else sees it who isn't that company and goes, oh, I like what you did there. I saw that thing you tried to do to get the attention of that company. How's it going, eh? And you might say, oh, you know, not so good, IDO, or Nike hasn't called me back yet, funnily enough. But they might go, well, we've got something. It's not quite as glamorous, but if you're up for it, this would be great to have you. We like your skill sets. We like what you're doing. And I think, you know, really how bad, it's kind of like the Dr. Pepper slogan of what's the worst that could happen. You know, you do some sketches, you make some prototypes, you enter a discussion, it'll take you somewhere.
I always feel that stuff now is with social media advertising. The advert pops up on my feed and I'll easily ignore. But by the kind of the third or the fourth, fifth time it pops up, I'm slightly curious. Guaranteed before, and this is how it works, and before the 10th time, I will have clicked on it, even if for a second, just to see that little bit more, and then delete it. And then it'll be flag it up to whoever, you know, take it off my feed. I'm not interested. But it's a bit of that, you've got to keep knocking, because all the doors are not going to open. So you've got to knock most of the doors, or a lot of doors, or even one to slightly open, or for somebody just to hear you knocking. That's what I think.
And I guess as we're talking, I hope people realize that we're talking a little bit in a freestyle way, because we're also sort of waiting for anyone to interject in chat with a bit of a question. That's also fine. So if you're sitting here thinking, well, Jude, that's all very well, but what you're not really addressing is this, please go with the chat. Tell us what's not working, or indeed why you haven't done that already.
I've got a question, right? So I'm going to ask you on behalf of Elisha. Thank you, Elisha. Elisha is a graduate on our course a few years ago, and it's great. I'm going to read it. So when he's searching for product design jobs, he mainly sees that they're either asking it's a UX or an UI job, or product design engineer. So do you think UX, UI jobs are worth applying for, coming from a product design background as we know it? And what key skills would be useful in these roles?
So I guess the short answer is no. But the expanded answer would be, you have to have a good reason why you want to tell someone in HR that you're not a UX designer by training, but you're going to be better than someone who's trained at UX. So the reason I say that is that you'd have to bring quite a strong proposition. And this is where I'm saying it's all a bit down to your hustle. And let's just be honest here, Peridot. We have got the people who who are sticking it out here. So maybe we have a tougher breed of student who's made it to the end. So I would say that if you're looking at a UX, I would honestly write that cover letter to say, I appreciate the job is for a UX. Let's say you're talking to Apple. Let's just make a really, easy example. And you say, look, I see you're trying to hire UX designers. I'm presuming that you're working in healthcare because I've seen from various websites that you're buying up startups and you're investing in technology in that space. I love working in user experience design. However, I feel as a product designer, I'm able to bring to the table XYZ extra things that could make that team stronger, more efficient. And I would love to work on, projects which are maybe, you could talk about the watch, which is obviously getting into a lot of diagnostic. You could talk about the need to respond to COVID and how you might have some ideas about emergent technologies or emergent markets. And then I think what you're doing is you're making it irrelevant what the title is. You're saying, I get what you do, I know what I can do, and I can see a really nice fit. And so you completely shift the conversation. I think just remember, the person who sees your CV and your folio and your cover letter isn't the CEO, it's the HR manager. And so you need to hit them over the head real fast with why, it does not compute that a product designer is applying for a UI UX role. And so again, it's that thing to having a bit of cheek. And I think strangely enough, I kind of wasn't just talking the talk. That was exactly how I got into a hackathon at IDEO, was by being a bit cheeky and a bit flip and saying, I bet you're awash with service designers and user experience designers, and I bet you've got no one, or at least very few people, who can build fast prototypes. And I know you want that. So you should consider me an extra ingredient. And similarly, if it was at Dyson and you had said like, hey, you're awash with engineers, boy, do you need some people who can do good graphics and user interface, they would have snapped you up when I was there back in 2009. So I think you can be quite a bit of a hustler to propose what the company needs, but you have to explain to them why they should take a chance on you.
Can I add to that as well? Yeah, because I was thinking about what you were saying earlier, Jude, and I was working with a guy many years ago who's retired about 10 years ago, and I thought, and he spoke to students at the time. He says, when I'm writing your reference letter, you're actually starting to write your reference letter when you start your degree. I thought, crikey, it's a bit harsh, but it actually is. But the thing is, though, I know for a fact is that when people actually ask us for references, we're being blatantly honest about students. But the thing is, though, a reference is actually superfluous. That's just a HR exercise. Because if you think about, if you get in the mindset that your letter of reference, what we want to say about you, is being written by you from the start, and that evidence comes through your portfolio and all of your experiences and everything you grasp, and bull by the horns or whatever you want to do at the start of that, and immerse yourself in as many different experiences as you can, and just get exposure. And you're tracking that whilst you're doing that, whilst your degree. That's the best reference letter you get, because it's self-endorsing, isn't it? Like I say, a reference itself is just peripheral to that. And I'm just thinking about Elisha saying that as well, because I know that Elisha's been doing a lot of stuff on service design, because he's at the front end of dealing with lots of problems on the technology side for companies and education departments and stuff. Now, I'm guaranteed that he's sort of changed their processes or protocols to ease that process. I mean, that's proper design head thinking stuff, that is, to rationalize all that stuff. You should sort of highlight all that stuff that you've implemented, because that is UX stuff. It's the same thing, you've actually applied your design thinking skills. So what I do is actually get loads of those examples of things that you put in place, or you've improved systems, and you can show that you've got a track record of actually taking stuff in, disseminating it all, making sense of it all, and rationalizing process. And that's a really, really, really strong skill. So, you need to highlight the skills that you've already got to show that you can do these things in the way that you apply, so that then they can sort of, the people that are reading it kind of going, oh yeah, those are the skills that we actually need. So, there's a way of sort of framing, like you say, Jude, I think there's a way of framing what you're putting in front of people to give the right messages.
Thank you. Right, we've got another question. And I've just asked him, does he want to ask? So, I don't know, Dylan. Got a question from Dylan. Does Dylan want to ask the question himself?
Go for it.
Oh, he says, do you mind asking? No, I don't mind asking Dylan.
Oh.
Okay. So it's about a question about putting stuff out there. So would you, putting stuff out there now to attract the attention of companies, in the current situation, is that still a good idea, or do we wait until put it out there? And I'm going to answer this one before you dive in, Jude, and I'm going to take Aled's words of wisdom. I'm not sure if Aled is here at the moment. What's the best month to advertise? Every month. So, is it worth waiting? No. What's the best time to get your work out there? Every single day. I don't know. Jude, dive in.
Yeah, I don't think I've got anything different to say to that. I would say the only time I hold stuff back is if I know that I'm wanting to create a particular message around something and I don't want it to distract. So for example, my YouTube channel is nothing but lockdown lectures at the minute. And the thing that, I guess a bit of a teaser here, the thing that's going to come after that is I've got a series of interviews with industry professionals, which of course is going to be relevant to hopefully anyone listening to this, but also it goes a little bit beyond the scope of just students and graduates. And so I haven't launched that simultaneously because I think it would confuse the two. But of course, that is a good problem to have because that's saying I've got more content than I need to show. But if your LinkedIn is sitting there empty, then no, fill it.
Absolutely. Another another question. And I think it's alluding to your own personal, I don't know, who, I'm going to be nasty now. I kind of don't like these type of questions. I'm going to be completely honest. I'm not going to name.
Can you say the question though?
The question is, can you recommend anybody to follow on LinkedIn? Because I always think that people should find their own inspiration. Because I'll go and there we'll say, oh, have you seen the work of this guy? And I look and go, yeah, there's nothing to me. But today we might be like, oh, and the same backwards, I'll go, Dewey, I've spent some money on this. What do you reckon? And he's like, yeah, right, that, isn't it? But so you've got to be careful of your heroes, and I think you've got to be careful of other people's heroes. But in a general sense, I don't know. But who do you personally follow then, Jude? Who are your?
So yeah, that would be the right
in high esteem.
The right way to assume it. I would say that also I'm probably a higher level of game than a graduate. That's probably just fair to acknowledge. So I know when I was a graduate, I started out following people who I wanted to emulate, who I thought they look like me. Whereas now, if you look at who I'm following, you'll see stuff like, I don't want to talk myself out of a job here, but there's companies like PepsiCo and Shell and ExxonMobil and IBM. And you might think, what? Really? Jude would want to work for those companies? And you go, no, I wouldn't work for those companies for them to do exactly what they do today. But I'm following because they're just titanic forces. I follow McDonald's. I don't follow McDonald's because I like what McDonald's do today. I'm interested to see when they start to change. It's like the Daily Mail. You might not like the Daily Mail as a liberal lefty, which I am, but to just ignore it and not have a radar for what's happening for what is the biggest online news website in the world, over 150 million views per day. I do keep an eye on what's going on Daily Mail because it's a barometer for what's happening in a huge swathe of society. So I would say, like, I'm following literally hundreds of people, hundreds of companies. You're gonna hit peak overload if you try and do that tomorrow. So I'd say to bring it back down to the here and now, follow things that, not people who you just want to look up to, but follow things that you think inform who you want to be. So if you are interested in sustainable technology, yes, follow 10 people who are huge movers and shakers in that industry. But also follow some small people who are like second year in a job in a sustainable design company. I think I've mentioned to you, like, Futera. is an interesting company to follow. They're doing a lot of work with exactly these sorts of companies. Like, I probably can't mention any names, but it's fair from their website to appreciate that they're working with huge companies and saying, how can you be more sustainable? So I would say, like, a classic thing of students is to always assume that some companies are nice and some companies are nasty. Whereas, again, it's that opportunistic thing of, well, what if you work for a nasty company and made them 10 times better? Is that actually more impactful than working for a goody two shoes company that is tiny and is just doing nothing somewhere in Shoreditch? Or do you want to like make a change for a company like McDonald's? If you got McDonald's to be 1% greener, that's huge. That's an incredible change of the needle. But, getting some hipsters in Shoreditch to like use a paper bag, who gives a damn? But that's just my perspective. And if it works for you, you should go pursue it and love it.
And there's yeah, absolutely. But there's also tremendous value in stepping outside of your own echo chamber, isn't there? And engaging with the opposites of what you think you are. Because again, if you're out there to change people's minds and behavior, the people who are like you already behave similarly to you anyway. So where's the challenge and where's the benefit in that?
Yeah. I'm looking to see we're still at the same number of people in case I offended anyone and they left, but
well,
apparently not.
We're up to 19 now, so we've had latecomers, but I don't think anybody's left.
Okay, any more questions then?
Not in the chat. So where's my second question, just in case? So I think one of the elements that stood out to me in a number of the lectures was the ability to be patient, really, in your own career. To kind of strategic patience is one way, and also I was speaking to a designer that we were working with over this year, and he was talking about how a lot of young graduates, they want the title, they want to get the senior designer title, and he was like, well, technically I'm a senior designer, but he wasn't really interested in the title, or they want to be a junior designer rather than just a designer. And his advice was actually, you don't even want to be a junior designer. You want to get in as low as possible and as close to the technicians and the manufacturers in that company who actually produce the products and get them out to market. And he also spent, 6 to 9 months in China, where he was liaising with the factories of how to keep the design integrity and design intent of the design into the stuff that could actually be made. So his skill and knowledge of the manufacturing grew much more than what he thought he kind of expected to, really, which made him a better designer through that. So the question is probably, I'd like you to explore a bit about, learning the trade, putting the time in, kind of the old-fashioned way, really. You've got to do the apprentice bit before you can get up the ladder. And it is a long game. If you're graduating now in 2020, 21, being 21 years old, you're going to be working for at least 40, 45 years. That is a long game, really. So I don't know, I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that is, and explore that a bit. And hopefully there'll be questions coming in.
Yeah, and do throw them in as I'm rabbiting away. But I guess I would agree with that perspective of being close to technicians. I think I'm someone who's always enjoyed learning through doing, or as they say, thinking with your hands. And so I've always enjoyed getting that exposure. And I can remember a time when I was working on the humidifier for Dyson. And that was a hell of a project, because that was like me and one other guy leading that entire product from its early sketchbook to the point where it then gets a proper design team and it goes further. But that, I remember, putting together a milling pattern for aluminium to basically as a huge heat sink for this thing that would nebulize the water. And I remember I took it down to one of the engineers, and they said, yeah, that's not going to do it, have it back. And they sent it back to me. And I was like a bit shocked. I was like, oh God, that's really bad. And so I said, well, you know, I just took it on myself to go down there and say, let's call him Bob, said, you know, hey, Bob, you know, I appreciate the feedback, but I was just wondering, could you be a bit more granular of where I went wrong? And he changed perspective from obviously being like, oh, effing graduates, they don't even know what they're doing, they don't know they're born, through to, all right then, son, sit down, I'm going to tell you. And so he just shotgunned me for like half an hour on everything that was wrong. But I brought it back to him like, you know, 24 hours later, and he was like, well, fair play, that's better, I'll take it. And he did it earlier than he'd even told me that he was going to do it the first time round. I think just acknowledging, and I think he almost felt a bit guilty that he'd been quite so blunt with me. But honestly, I couldn't have thanked him more. And looking back, I learned so much from that condensed half an hour of he was listening to me when I was saying, but why is it you can't do this? Why is it you can't have that undercut? And he explained it to me in huge detail. So I'd say, don't get me wrong, it's not that technicians are everything in your career, but at the beginning of your career, when you're ultimately being judged on can you do stuff well, you know, when you're a graduate, they're your best allies, and also they're the people who will come save you if you've made a terrible mistake and your manager's screaming at you. They're the people who maybe put something in a queue earlier or help you out or pull a bit of a late evening to get it done for you. I'd say that later on in the game, of course, the dirty word that is politics and, you know, professional acumen, whatever you want to call it, starts to creep in. And then, of course, it helps to develop those different managerial skills. But I would say first and foremost, your best friends are technicians when you start a job, for sure.
Cool, thank you. We're about halfway. I'm going to launch into a poll. There's 3 questions. It's anonymous this time because I think it's not a secret, but the structure of any good lecture or lesson is that we kind of learn something, some extra knowledge given. It makes you question yourself, and there's a bit of provocation. So if you're not into provocation, I don't know, close your eyes for the next 2 minutes. But if you fancy it, I'm launching the poll. Right, this is going, so you should see something pop up. And
do I do this?
Absolutely, it's anonymous. No. I've just noticed I can't do it, but I will see results coming.
I'll have a look at it. Yeah,
real time. Yeah, you don't have to. It will give me a percentage. I'll be quiet now because there's a bit of reading.
I told you needed a house band. We'll get that for next one.
I could start humming, but I'm going to see what music I've got on my phone.
Or don't. We'll be taken down for copyright. Tom Jones, obviously. That's I know what your go-to is.
Can't find. Where's that going?
I was serious about they'll take the video down. Don't play it.
I've got some Welsh music. I reckon I could smooth it over with them. Enough. Right. We're kicking in now. 42% voted. Cool.
Hey.
Here we go.
So I guess do you want to give a little bit of explanation while people are finishing of where you were hoping to take these questions then, because they're a little bit more thorny than your usual what's your favorite biscuit questions.
Yeah, that was a sweet one last time. I don't know. Do you want to dive in on this? The first question came from you.
I guess I appreciate people are still voting, but I appreciate it's a slightly leading question and the answers are obviously chippy towards. I think most people would interpret there's a bit of sarcasm around, you'll get your job just because you're talented. I think I'm obviously leading people to consider what are the other things that might be most beneficial. And genuinely, it's not a leading question to the extent of I'm curious to know which people think are the most pertinent things outside of talent, because as they always say, talent is overrated. So, but I think there's some thorny ones of like, you know, are your family well connected? You know, how well do you know yourself?
We're up to, there's 2 people left, but I don't know if they want to vote, so I'm going to give you about 5 seconds. This will then be a 3-minute poll.
There we go.
So I'm going to end polling.
All righty.
And then I'm going to share results. I'm going to take a photograph because last time I lost the results.
Okay, so I'll react to it while you're getting everything done.
Yeah, quite interesting. I want to know who the corrupt one is.
Yeah.
I'm more worried about the my family is well connected one. I'm sure that's just a plug by some cheeky buggers.
I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm kind of taking it as if there is a flippant reply in it, it'll have to go in as an honest one. So I kind of think like the reason I wanted to put the family is well connected is I didn't have that. But I don't think you should be ashamed of it if you do have connections. And also sometimes your connections that you think your family, oh, they're not designers, they don't move in that world, that doesn't mean that their connections are useless. You know, I remember working in the NHS for my final year project, and my aunt and uncle are both in the NHS, or were, they've retired since. But that was actually hugely useful for me, because I was checking a little bit the tone of voice and how I would engage the institution. So I'd say that for that, it's a bit of a misleading question, because it's a little bit, the moral is don't assume that you haven't got the connections. There's, if you want to Google a phrase of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, then that, you know, the fable is that, you know, Kevin Bacon is in so many different films that through only 6 films, you'll be able to connect to another Kevin Bacon film. And I kind of think actually that's the truth of most people's families. Unless you're incredibly estranged, you will have people who might be able to connect you to a great company. So I would say actually the perception is that your family is not well connected. The truth is that you haven't worked it hard enough and thought laterally. And so it is a creative exercise in itself. I guess corruption isn't a particularly great one to find the silver lining to, but at the same time, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to add to what you were just saying as well, because I remember one of my cousins' husband, you know, they live South Wales, we live in North Wales, I met them a few times. And when you talk to your family members, but you don't really talk to some of them, do you know what I mean? And I remember just once, so what exactly do you do? And it was a brilliant conversation. Oh, and then, you know, that conversation led on to a lot of other stuff. So even the people that you think you know, you probably don't even know half of the stuff that they actually do. And it's that, that kind of tourist mindset now. So if you're dreading family gatherings, people, right? And, you know, let's be honest, some family do's is like, I've got to go to that one. But go to it with that tourist mindset and find stuff out about people. You know, I'm just a nosy person anyway.
Yeah.
Right. There's no.
And I think that you know, working hard is laudable, but I would say at the end of the day, you're at further education. I don't know what the percentage is of British people that are in a further education, but assuming that you're even 2-2 and above, it's assumed that you work hard. So it will not really make much difference. That's not to say that you haven't got to have a good work ethic, but like occasionally I have seen folios from students that say I'm a hard worker, and you're like, says who? You know, and to what extent? Whereas if you say, look, here's a picture of me, we did this project, I'm on a factory floor in Shenzhen, we managed to prototype this in 2 weeks, and I was eating pot noodles and, you know, had a terrible stomach incident and I still carried on through and got it launched on time, that says you worked hard without using a limp phrase of I work hard. So I'm not down on the people who said I work hard. I appreciate it's good to be proud that you work hard, but I'm just saying it's that old thing of show it, don't say it.
But I also know, Jude, when you tell me you've worked hard, I know what your working hard is. And I know when some other people tell me they worked hard, I also know what they mean when they say they worked hard.
So, I mean, this is it. And again, I'm certainly not the benchmark. There's people who I look to and go, yeah, there's a friend of mine, he's now at Apple, but I mean, he was famous for like getting 4 hours sleep, but that's too hard for me. Yeah. And so I work differently, or I should say different if I'm going to be Apple. But yeah, I work different to him. And the point is, it's not about comparing. You've got to find your own, what your equivalent of hard work is. Sometimes the best work can be done staring out of a window, having time to step back and reflect. That can be where some of the best stuff comes from. Calculated risks and exposure. I think that if that's a low score at the minute, that would be something, especially in COVID, to beef up. And what I mean by that, in case anyone was thinking, well, I didn't understand the question, it is kind of the LinkedIn stuff of saying, taking a calculated risk to dedicate a week of your time, making something, producing something, whatever, and putting it out there in a calculated way that it might get some exposure. And it could be, as I've mentioned, Instructables, Hackster, Core 77, you've seen the lecture series, this. If you don't, go watch it. Knowing what I'm good at, again, patience. It's good that you know what you're good at now, but most of it you're going to discover. And I think the ones these last ones really are about saying you won't, it's a shame actually, the world is willing to pay for change for good. I think, I'm glad that there isn't too much of that, because, just because you got a degree doesn't mean you're entitled to a great job and happiness. It's definitely going to come with work and from all those things above. So I think, again, the latter statement of needing a mix of progress and manipulation, that is design and marketing in disguise, really, of saying most stuff does come from that combination of good idea, but good communication. So do you want to take question number 2?
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing the results now. I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to pose a question that came in at the end of last time from Katie, really. It was a question to do with ethics, and there's an article or an article I keep going back to now, or an essay I keep going back to now and again. It's from Milton Glaser, and if people are not aware of who he is, obviously Google this chat finishes, but he is a graphic designer, and he's the guy that designed the I Heart NY logo. But he's got a 12 steps on the graphic designer's road to hell. So ethically, where are you willing to go in your own personal level? And he's got 12 steps, so I won't read them all, but he starts off, would you be comfortable designing a package to look bigger on the shelf? That's the kind of the first one. And they ramp up.
Should we screen share it, do you think?
Right, okay. Do a
cheeky one.
I'll do this one. And I've got this on Design Nerd website. So
we'll throw a link in below for anyone who's come into this.
Right, here we
recorded.
Go. Share. Right, so hopefully you are now seeing.
There we go.
Just seeing the website. None of my pop. None. Okay. So we've got this 12 steps. Would you design an ad for a slow, boring film to make it seem like a light-hearted comedy? I won't read all of them. Designing an advertising campaign for a company with a history of known discrimination in minority hiring. 6. Designing a line of t-shirts for a manufacturer that employs child labour. Number 8. And then number 12. Designing an ad for a product whose frequent use could result in the user's death. And I think Katie's question was, should designers only do good? So my question really is, what is your opinion on working ethically, and let's be honest, versus paying the bills? Because you leave university, you've got debt, you need a job, you need to start paying your way, your parents want you to start paying your way. So do you take that job, or, I don't know, have you ever questioned your own ethical practice, Jude? And I'll stop sharing so we can go back to you.
I guess it's always a little bit, I try to frame it with, I guess it's like charity. It's easier to be charitable when you've got a lot to give. So I kind of think like it's not to say that if you don't have a lot, you're exempt from being ethically minded, as obviously history would tell us that doesn't correlate at all. There's plenty of people who had nothing and are incredibly generous and incredibly ethical. But I guess it's fair to say that I wouldn't judge someone who maybe had to make a tough choice. And I think as soon as you travel a little, and it could be just outside your house, outside of your borough, or it could be to somewhere different in the world, you realize not everybody always has the freedom to make ethical choices as priority number one. Sometimes feeding the family comes first. But I would say that if you're likely to be in the group of further education and all these good things, then probably it's fair to say you've got a better chance than most people to try and make a better change in the world. And dare I say it, if you are 21, of course you might have a young family, but it's statistically probable that you don't. So you have somewhat less pressure on eating baked beans and toast and scraping through and and being okay with a bit of a rubbishy wage, but you're doing something you feel really excited about. I can say as a dad of a toddler, you definitely do adjust your bravado and your chances, or if I do take a chance, I make sure I have a bit of a safety net in case it all goes wrong. Whereas I think when I was younger, I was able to leap without looking, more so. I don't particularly lament not doing that, as I think it's nice to enjoy each phase of life differently. But I guess to answer the question about ethics, I think what I would say is that I guess it's that thing of contrast. If you're super ethically minded and you join a company that's very ethical, chances are you're going to be one of the herd, and that's fine. You might double down, you might find your tribe, it might feel very rewarding. But conversely, it's sometimes quite fun to be the black sheep. And so, when I joined Sugru, it's not to say that they were unethical, don't go in that direction. It's more that they weren't especially technical as a company around the time I started. It was everything that you love about a startup, which was incredibly bold, ambitious, fast-moving, dynamic, charismatic. But they were getting to that point of scale where you go, actually, we need to move away from hand packing our product to full automation. And so bringing in someone who's quite technical and comparatively straight-laced to the craziness of the founders, which is just, I think, it's that yin and yang. It's sometimes the fact that you are different can make it fun. So I'd say that for me, to unpick what ethics means to you and what it means to a company is sometimes a really great place to be, because you could say with one clean brushstroke that fashion is inherently unethical. It generally tries to get away with the bare minimum. If it isn't sweatshops, then it uses other cheap labor. But we could go into that institution, that organization, that industry, and try and change it from a totally more different radical angle. So I think, you as product designers could end up creating huge impact on an ethical level, just by virtue of the fact you're different and you're not really supposed to be there, in quotes. So I would say have meaningful fun and creativity with ethics rather than see it as black and white.
And probably, if those who are listening and tuning in, if you haven't questioned yourself along those routes, that is a good thought exercise of an afternoon to sit down and kind of think, what would I do in that situation, or how would I try and create something where I'm comfortable with it and I still have that impact somewhere else. I think there's a lot of time that you can use to do some thinking during these funny times. I'm trying to look now that we haven't had another question coming in.
Would come in.
Oh, yeah, okay. Can product designers enter design engineering jobs with extra work, or do they need a different degree?
Do you mean the deficit is there's product design and product design with engineering?
I don't know.
Could they
Simon,
just reply yes or no?
Do you want to join, or is it product design? I know we've had graduates who are now working as design engineers within companies following a product design degree. Do you want to expand a bit on that, Simon?
I'll take a punt at it while we're waiting. But yeah, I think if he's saying, and I guess you could apply this to any question, is if you do a degree which appears finite, it feels like it encompasses one discipline or one skill set, I guess my answer would be no, because essentially I was doing product design with engineering, and yet the fine art, because I was part of Glasgow University, they had a series of lectures on design history and art history. And it was kind of cool, actually, because it was, instead of it being in a dusty old lecture theatre, it was actually in the local cinema auditorium. And I ended up asking formally, can I go to that? And the answer was no, because you're not part of that course. But I just went along anyway. And lo and behold, the statistical chances are that that seating room is never at 100% capacity, because there's going to be someone who had a heavy night and has got a hangover and didn't show up. So there was always seating, and I just went to the back and snuck in at the end 5 minutes after it started, but basically just got schooled in design history because I wanted to. And I would say that that stood me in good stead for understanding the broader perspective of things like ethics and how other things that, contribute to different industries. So I guess what I'm saying is that don't feel that you can't get a design engineering job just because you haven't formally done an engineering training. I think if
how would you recommend about going about that then?
Right. Oh, hold on. Welcome, Simon.
Oh, that was good.
Right. Go
Hello.
again. Sorry, we missed a bit of that.
So, from when I was applying to uni courses, design engineering was completely different to product design.
Yeah,
and long story short, I made the wrong decision. Should have gone with design engineering, but I do like my course, and I want to go into more design engineering, perhaps like aerodynamics. How would you recommend going about that?
So I'd say the thing you want to maybe Google is like this phrase of lateral career moves, or how to sidestep in a career, and that means that you're not just listening to what I think, you've got a whole world out there. But to give some color to what that means, and you can appreciate, I studied chemistry, and I hadn't studied engineering, I hadn't studied art and design at A level. And so the question is, well, how did I get into the Glasgow School of Art, which for the sake of argument is competitive? And my tutor just said, but you showed an aptitude, even though I realized you had no formal qualification and training in it. So I think that the key for you is to show aptitude and a good disposition towards engineering. And I think it means that, for example, I won't mention the name of the company to promote it, but I'm sitting next to a kit 3D printer, which I've just built. And I think, if you're someone who can put together that sort of thing really, really quickly, you probably got a good aptitude for engineering. And so I think the question for you then is doing projects which communicate the fact that despite your education, you are very, very technical and you have an aptitude for it. So while I was just giving that example, the thing that came to mind, I remember looking at McLaren. So McLaren, obviously very interested in aerodynamics. If you got into it by talking to a product designer and said, look, I would love to come, can I do an internship? I might have to work in the product design because that's where I'm going to be most useful. But I'm so passionate about aerodynamics and engineering and whatever, computational fluid dynamics. Don't just say it. Say, look, I did a mini project where I just remember seeing someone who made a drone that was using the Coanda effect, which is the same thing that's used in Dyson fans. So it caught my attention. But if you do something like that, which is a bit nuts, it doesn't have to be the fact that you've memorized all the equations for hoop stress and, you know, I-beam analysis, which I had to do in engineering. It's the fact that you can apply yourself to a highly technical problem and get through to the other side. That's honestly what they're going to be looking for. It's very rarely about the academic. It's about the applied. Hope that's helpful.
Simon, can I ask you, what's your putting you on the spot now? What's your dream job, Simon? In that sense, design engineer.
Currently, I'm not entirely sure, because it used to be working on super yachts, and now I've just gone and done that.
Oh,
but now
there you go then.
But in that environment, all the product designers go into joinery, and not the other side, which I really enjoyed when I was just helping with little bits. But I want to go into working with composites. I do like my hydro and aerodynamics. So that's why I'm looking to go for a car company for my next placement.
I mentioned McLaren, so why not McLaren?
Yeah.
It's literally
I'm going to
just
try McLaren.
It's like over the border for you. It's like, I think it's even it's West London. It's like, yeah. So I think, just if I'm not putting you on the spot, Simon, and thank you for having the courage to ask the question. I really respect that. But what is it that you think would be tricky to help you get there? Because it sounds like you've already actually, maybe you're being humble, but it sounds like you're already doing exactly what I just suggested, which is show that you have aptitude. I mean, if you've just built or helped with a super yacht, that sounds pretty damn impressive to me.
It's sort of so going from a graduate, if you've got a design engineering graduate versus a product design graduate, sort of going for aerodynamics, how would I stand myself apart from someone who would know the equations for that, and certain things will do this, certain things will do that?
I guess the thing to remember is not to compare yourself on a metric which you think matters when maybe it doesn't. So at Dyson, I don't want to sound like I'm speaking for the whole company, because I'm certainly not and trying to, but I'm pretty sure that most engineers would hire, you know, a young enthusiastic graduate who's built a load of cool stuff over someone who hasn't done any of that but got straight A's. I will go out on a limb and say I'd be very surprised if many engineers countered that. And, you know, I've got friends who work at NASA, Apple, IDEO, McLaren, all these sorts of places. And I'm pretty sure whenever you speak to any of those people, they've always got some mad thing which they do as a hobby. There's a guy at Dyson who every other month or something, he would bring in a steam-powered car, like a vintage car that worked on steam. It had like a boiler and everything. And the level of engineering that guy took it to was just jaw-dropping. Like, no one was even close to that guy's skills. It was just extraordinary. And so I think if you can dazzle a company like McLaren that you built, I don't know, a new type of aerofoil and you tested it in the local duck pond, but you did it really systematically and you've got some charts and graphs of the performance. I think, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that on like aeroplane wings, they've got those little turny-uppy bits. That was a graduate who did that because he was just goofing around and he just managed to prove that it was better. And so long story short, it got implemented. But I think that's the sort of thing you want to go for is pick a meaty problem, prove that you can do it without a ton of money and supervision and resources. And I would be really shocked if McLaren didn't at least give you a first interview.
Thank you. Cracking answer. You mentioned that you bought a new machine and you got a 3D printer in the corner there, but how much did you pay for that? Because it's not an expensive piece of kit, is it?
No, I think I joked about this, that it's not that I want to be stealing from the resources of people making face masks at all. It's that I genuinely had a project where my little 100 by 100 printer just literally can't do it. So I needed to get one that was, considerably larger. But it was kind of crazy that it's $200, and I just can't help but think, if you're in lockdown at the minute and you need to bolster your folio with some cool prototypes. I mean, it's just, it arrived in a week from Prague, and literally within, 3 hours it's up and running and printing. And I just think, why would you not invest in that?
I'm also thinking the students who were staying in halls, and correct me if I'm wrong, people, I think you've been refunded for part of the term that you weren't sleeping in those rooms because of the lockdown. If you've had to move home, I think you've been refunded, I'm sure. Go on, spend that. I dare you to spend some of that money on your own 3D printer. And on that bombshell, right, we are slightly 2 minutes over, but I've got a last poem, so I'm going to share this poem. This is to do with the lectures. Again, it's anonymous, I think. If not, don't check it anyway. But we are interested in the videos that you watched, how you watched them, and general feedback. There's only 3 questions in this, but please, in the chat, could you, you are the people who are in the room, right? I'm really interested in the guys that didn't tune into this chat. So when we do this again, how could we make it better to get them engaged? How can we keep them engaged? What can we tell them? And if there's any of those guys watching this after, which is fair enough, again, I emailed people to remind them of this. I'm genuinely interested in this. Even if you don't want to tune in, let me know why you're not interested. Because I'm really interested in why you're not interested, so we can make this a better experience next time.
And just also say, from my perspective, there's absolutely no offense taken. At the end of the day, this is the same as any design critique you do at university, and indeed will do in real life. The fact is, there aren't a lot of lockdown lectures out there. So I wasn't able to do a quick market analysis, survey the best competition, and then figure out the formula and do it. So I got no problem if you're like, well, actually, lecture 2 was really weak, but lecture 3 was much better. I would love you to be as honest and open, and it just means that we get to make a better product. But you guys are the client, not us, not Peridot.
And even, absolutely, and even after this, if you say, I wish I'd have said that, just email it through to me, please, people, because we do read. Right, I launched this poll. Just 3 questions in this, and then if you can put some comments within the chat.
Thank you so much. And as I said, it's genuinely interesting, because for me, this is the sort of project I love doing, where it is new, it's an experiment. But yeah, it only gets better if you say.
The countdown music is what I want, really.
That's it. And I think I should just say as well, for question 2, there's no shame in putting I skip through. I'm someone who skips through videos a lot, and so there's no problem with that. That's not a negative feedback.
I told you, Jude, you were up to 1.75 speed towards the end. So
absolutely fine.
And then possibly double speed on some, if I wasn't doing anything else. 10 of 18, we are working through.
And I guess if you're feeling like, but this poll doesn't do it for me, please put the question in chat. So if you're saying, what I really would have loved Jude to talk about was this, so I've done a bunch of stuff on careers in the 3 years running that I've been with the design conference. But if you still feel there's something that wasn't addressed in any of those, or indeed you just feel needs doubling down on, then please say. But I really appreciated Simon's question, as it was specific, because, you know, sometimes if it's just like, how do I get a job? It gives me nothing to work with. But if it's like, how do I get a job in this area when I've got a specific weakness, then that gives me something to work with. So please make it personal, even if it's anonymous.
Right, last 30 seconds, people, then the poll will be up for 3 minutes.
Yep. And I think as anyone who's watched the YouTube videos thus far knows, I do actually reply to the questions because I'm paid to.
Yes, it's in the contract.
That's it. I have to reply to all questions, no matter how stupid. No, but in all seriousness, if someone's not watching this after the live, I will take the time. So please let me know.
Right, we're up to 83%. So I'm ending polling in 3, 2. Okay, and poll share results. Right, there you go.
All right.
Take a photograph of that.
Ah, interesting. All right.
Because I think it's fair to say there's much more people than our students that have watched the lectures on YouTube, because the numbers are pretty good. You know, they look good to me. So it's just and obviously you can get the stats of how many minutes they watched on the particular video and stuff. But I think it's nice to get it from our own cohorts. So I'm gonna. I don't know. Do you want to say something about that, Jude? Or
yeah, I guess I'm of course curious to know whether the general tailing off is through to I didn't find it interesting, or I got what I needed from it and I moved on. So maybe do you know what I mean? You need almost, yeah. I guess you'd say in polls it was like, what's the weighting? Because obviously if lecture 7 was tremendously useful, but the fact is most people were like, don't worry, I'm good, I got what I needed, then it doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad one. So that's our learning on how you structure the poll questions. But let's just take it as it comes, in that, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that the rough and ready prototyping, that's great to know that was a useful one for people. And cool. Through to the first chunk of the user testing and communication.
I think, to make a comment as well, I think the later videos bear more relevance as you sort of go through the course. So if you think about who's actually watched them, and I think that they are actually really, really relevant to think of you as a designer and where you are within that industry, within the world, and your place within it, and how you can get there. And I, you know, as you know, I found those really, really interesting, because it's everything that we're sort of trying to preach, and it was sort of encapsulated really, really well. But I think maybe that reflects the students and what they've seen and where they're at in their sort of design careers, if you see what I mean. So don't be hard on yourself there.
No, but I appreciate it. It's one of those difficult things of, so for example, on LinkedIn just today, I picked up on a comment from Richard Hayes, who's a toy designer, and he said that, you know, the thing that makes a really great game or toy or experience often isn't the knickknacks and things in it. It's often the gaps, the space between it, because that's where you imbue it with the emotion. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like, if I had been told that at the beginning of my career, and this is just speaking for me, I'm sure there's smarter, quicker students, but I wouldn't have really got the gravity of that. It would have been like the same as when people say, keep it simple, stupid. You're like, all right, great, I understand it. But actually applying it and living it is so much harder. So I guess it always is that tricky thing of, do you simplify it so that everyone understands it, or do you leave a few bits that are kind of tough and need chewing on? But I'd love to know if we got any other questions of where people felt that would have been amazing if you had done more on this, or even added an extra chapter or whatever. That would be terrific feedback, as I've had an absolute blast doing this, and certainly without committing Bangor to anything, I think certainly the discussions have been that this isn't the last dance. So it's been a lot of fun.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Jude, Dewey, designers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are free. This session will draw to a close. So again, if you could put some comments in the chat if you want, feel free to leave. I know Jude will hang around for a bit.
I'll wait in case we get a surprise killer question, as we had a great one last time, actually.
Yeah, so we'll
from a young lady.
Couple of minutes, but otherwise, thank you very much. Stay safe, people.
Yep. Take care.
Jude, you need something like what was that? Keep dancing thing on Strictly Come Dancing. You need to finish with like keep prototyping or something. I think you need the catchphrase now.
Well, I think I remember saying to you quite early on that I wasn't sure whether you were trying to channel the Looney Tunes Porky Pig, That's All Folk, with the circle around my head, but I decided not to undermine the sensible nature. You
don't know how close to the truth that was. And I felt you had a spy camera somewhere on my spyware on my laptop.
That's it. It's hard to take a man seriously in a circle.
Elisha, if you're still around and you want to apply for some design jobs, send through your stuff. We'll have a look at it and we'll take you through it. If you want to highlight some of your skills and stuff to make them more specific to job applications. So I'm just throwing this in there because I know Elisha's still here with his mic off.
And I'm seeing a few comments, but I don't think I see the questions from anyone, any students. There's 9 people left. Go on, throw me a curveball, or forever hold your peace and get flawless jobs.
Can I also give, although I wanted to say earlier, can I give Simon a case study? We had a student who was for 2 years, nearly 3 years, trying to get into Jaguar Land Rover, and he was really, really interested in sort of body styling and aerodynamics, and really, really wanted to do that. That's all he wanted to do. And he actually got in there and spent 10 weeks with him, and he was absolutely bored, and he absolutely hated it. And he just said, I don't want to do that job. So it was a really, really good way of him finding out that it wasn't what it was cracked up to be. And I think, in Simon's case, he's got some really, really brilliant experiences to springboard into the next placement. It's a fantastic opportunity, isn't it, to work all the composite materials and stuff like that, and to work with a really prestigious company that's known sort of worldwide and stuff. Really, really, for year one, it's fantastic.
And this is always the problem. We're in the injury time now, and I just remembered. I don't know whether Simon's still with us. Can you tell?
Yeah, he's here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. So Simon, you need to check out on Netflix. There's a series about Frank Stevenson called Chasing Perfect. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Okay, then you have to see it. I think it will underscore everything that I've said with someone who's actually in the industry. But basically, this was the guy who redesigned Mini. He basically saved Fiat from total bankruptcy by designing the Fiat 500. He had designed all sorts of stuff from literally everyone, Ferrari, whoever it was, one of the big F1 companies, but basically just an extraordinary documentary on, how creativity meets cars and what it means to us and society, an expression of our humanity. It's an absolutely incredible documentary. And without spoiling it for you, there are very few equations in it, and you'll have to figure out why for yourself and own that one, because it just isn't about the equations, man. Like, some of the best engineers, of course the equations help certain things, of course they do, but I kind of feel like it's like I'm sitting next to a printer and I'm already getting into the presets and all the tinkering, and it's not because of the engineering, it's just because I'm curious. And I think that that's what makes the engineer isn't the calculations, it's the curiosity.
Oh, it says Simon Pink is talking. Did you say something, Simon?
Oh no, I didn't say anything.
All right, okay. How can we work on the braveness to switch your cameras on, Simon?
Go on, give us a wave.
Oh, there he is. Thank you. Right, everybody give me a smile because I'm going to screenshot this.
Okay.
Right, there you go. Oh, I'm just wondering if Simon's hand came in front of his face. Was he quick enough? No, you weren't. Got you. But thank you, Simon, for asking that question. It's probably not easy, but thank you.
No,
You might
but
also
definitely.
want to.
No, go ahead, Simon.
Just for lectures, you might also want to read the last couple of paragraphs in my report. All of you.
Say again.
You might want to read the last few paragraphs of my report as well. That's just a side note.
Okay.
Okay. Your work placement report.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Okay. We'll do that.
Jude, did you ever work with a Paul Stevens? I think he works in packaging. He was quite
Paul
in
Stevens?
Dyson.
Yeah.
Like beard, largish.
Yeah.
Ah, no, Paul. I'm good mates with him.
So there you go. So definitely like have a chat with people like that.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, he now works for 3M, and he got moved to Germany to design his entire office and building.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try and contact him at some point. But I've also got contacts in Mercedes Petronas, Red Bull Formula One, and somewhere in Peterborough that I'm not sure of the name of.
Yeah. But I think as well, man, to pick up on Perida's thing of like spending a bit of cash when it matters most. I'd say it doesn't even have to be the 3D printer, but honestly, like getting a couple of books of like people who are deep in the industry. And I'd say the best thing for you is to try and not get the books which are just all the hero shots. Get the books that have process and like how they work, because that's your food right now.
Yeah.
There's no point comparing yourself to someone who's been 30 years in the industry, but you can start to pick apart how they work, how they think, how they generate ideas. And that's why I really, as someone who, just for the record, I'm really not a car person at all, but I still love that documentary. And it's like, I love the movie Senna, absolutely blew me away, because it was about the process and the emotions and the mindset and the industry. So I'd always say, like, dial into that. Don't worry about the end result. Dial into the process.
Okay.
Cool. And also, did you work as a butcher, Jude?
Yeah.
Yes. Simon, you also work in a
Yeah,
butcher,
I'm currently working in a butchery as well.
Well, out at the moment.
Well, yeah.
Oh, so I'll give you a challenge. Do you know what seam cutting is?
Cutting down the seams of the animal.
Yeah, so basically between the muscle group. So it was funny because I didn't realize that I kind of almost taught myself how to seam cut because it just was interesting, because I sort of always saw it as like a Da Vinci-esque. I wanted to explore how the tissue groups worked. And then I realized actually it's a French thing. So seam cutting is like a trained skill that French chefs and whatever you call them, the butchers, learn. But I would almost say, like, if you're into seam cutting, I would almost like find a way to include that in your folio.
Yeah.
Because I think that to the right type of car designer, especially if you watch this guy Frank, he's totally like that. He sees curvature and splines in literally everything. It's like a defect, you could say, that works in the world. But I would say, like, for me, like seam cutting was mechanics. It was like, I'm not in any way trying to imply the same power as Da Vinci, but it's the same thing that you go, I get why he got excited by this, because it's how the world works. And I think yeah, if you can be a bit brave and put a couple of those things in your folio that you think have some merit, I think that's the sort of thing that actually gets you a job, because people are looking for like someone, especially when they're young, to think differently. That's what they would really love. So I'd say you don't have to, if it's not the butchery, don't worry about it. But I'd be surprised, knowing what I went through working in a butcher's, that you don't come away with an appreciation for how tools work and how the body goes together. And I think if you can communicate that in an artistic way, I think for me, I'd be surprised if a car designer didn't get it. Bit weird, but there you go.
Cool. Right. Well, I'm going to draw this to a close now. It's 22 minutes past 3.
Yeah.
There's a bit of sun out. I'm going to get a cup of tea and I'm going to sit with some biscuits in the sun now. So, Jude, again, thank you. Thank you very much. Apparently, we have still got Adam and the Lights Chat and Giles and Mizuo. So, if you're still there, thank you very much. But we will be switching this off now. Yeah. Until next time, people.
Take care.
Brilliant.
Thanks
folks.
again.
Thank you. Thanks.
Ta-ra.
Fantastic. Cheers, folks. Bye.
Bye.